The Prime Minister's chief aide Dominic Cummings is facing fresh allegations that he breached lockdown rules. He and the government had said he acted reasonably and legally by driving from London to County Durham while his wife had coronavirus symptoms. But The Observer and Sunday Mirror are now reporting he was seen in the northeast on 2 more occasions, after recovering from his own COVID-19 symptoms and returning to work in London. Number 10 said the story is inaccurate. Downing Street has also denied that police spoke with family members of Mr. Cummings about this matter. But Durham police insist their officers spoke to Mr. Cummings' father, who confirmed that his son had travelled with his family from London. Labour has called for an urgent inquiry into the allegations. Shadow Policing Minister Sarah Jones told Sky's Sophie Ridge on Sunday that people are feeling rightly angry. "I think people are rightly feeling is it one rule for us and one rule for people at the top," she said. Government ministers have rallied around Mr. Cummings and have defended his conduct. They said Mr. Cummings and his wife were right to self-isolate at a property adjacent to other family members in case they needed help with childcare. But backbench Tory MP and former chairman of the European Research Group, ERG, Steve Baker has called for Mr. Cummings to resign, saying he must go before he does any more harm to the UK. The government, the Prime Minister, our institutions or the Conservative Party. Speaking to reporters outside his home in London on Saturday morning, Mr. Cummings said he would not be resigning and had done the right thing by travelling 260 miles with his wife and young son to be near relatives when she developed COVID-19 symptoms at the end of March. Later that day, the 2 newspapers revealed that witnesses have reported seeing Mr. Cummings in Barnard Castle, more than 25 miles from Durham, on the 12th of April. On the 14th of April, he was seen in London. According to a witness, he was spotted again in How Hall Woods near Durham on the 19th of April. Mr. Cummings is yet to publicly respond to the new claims. But the Sunday Telegraph reports he told Downing Street he left Durham on the 13th of April, and that the claim he made a second trip from London was totally false. In response to the fresh claims, Downing Street said, yesterday the Mirror and Guardian wrote inaccurate stories about Mr. Cummings. Today they are writing more inaccurate stories, including claims that Mr. Cummings returned to Durham after returning to work in Downing Street on the 14th of April. We will not waste our time answering a stream of false allegations about Mr. Cummings from campaigning newspapers. The BBC's political correspondent Ian Watson says ministers hope questions about Mr. Cummings' movement will not have dented public trust in the government's lockdown guidance. Quick calls. Opposition parties renewed their calls for the Prime Minister's advisor to go. The SNP's Ian Blackford said Mr. Cummings has to leave office, while acting Liberal Democrat leader Sir Ed Davey told BBC Radio 5 Live, if Dominic Cummings has not been sacked by tomorrow, I think the Prime Minister's judgment is in serious doubt. Government advice had been for people to stay at home during the first weeks of lockdown. Self-isolation at home continues to be advised for those with coronavirus symptoms. However, ministers offered their support to Mr. Cummings earlier in the day, with Health Secretary Matt Hancock tweeting that it was entirely right for the senior aide to find childcare. Cabinet Office Minister Michael Gove tweeted, "Caring for your wife and child is not a crime." England's Deputy Chief Medical Officer Dr. Jenny Harries also said all health guidance should be applied with common sense. But following the fresh reports concerning the alleged second visit to County Durham, a Labour source said, if these latest revelations are true, why on earth were cabinet ministers sent out this afternoon to defend Dominic Cummings? Before the new allegations, Both Labour and the SNP said Mr. Cummings flouted the government's own advice and called for an urgent inquiry into his conduct. It comes as the government announced 282 more people had died with coronavirus since Friday, across all settings, bringing the total to 36,675. When asked by reporters outside his home on Saturday whether his traveling to Durham looked good, he said, "Who cares about good looks? It's a question of doing the right thing. It's not about what you guys think." Asked whether he would reconsider his position, he said, "Obviously not.